You have put the relationship with your abusers into an active state of emotional silence. So there's no more arguments, no more emotional games, manipulation, gossip, being ostracized, or defending yourself. No more verbal or physical engagement. This emotional silence largely mutes your predatory family's opportunity to continue to create that chaos in your life. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat podcast, where we talk about everything ADHD and scapegoating. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about going no contact with the toxic, harmful people in your life.
So let's talk about it. In the book by Dr. Sherrie Campbell, Adult Survivors of Toxic Family Members, she discusses how we can maintain boundaries, deal with the criticism, and heal from the shame after ties have been cut. And she discusses the differences between giving someone the silent treatment versus choosing to go no contact. And what she reiterates is you can tell the difference by the intent of someone's actions. So when someone's giving you the silent treatment, they're refusing to communicate with you as a way to withhold a connection. The intention is to punish the other person, and in giving the silent treatment, they're treating you as if you're invisible, you don't exist, you don't matter. You never mattered, because it's not important for them to have a conversation with you so that you can understand why they're mad at you. So when they're doing that, it's completely different than you severing ties or going no contact. Because when you decide, I'm going no contact, you're doing so for your own protection. You're not doing this to cause harm. You're not doing anything to your family. Because a lot of times we've talked about the smear campaign, the talking negatively, the triangulation, all of those things. Those are coming from the people who are implementing a silent treatment as a form of control or manipulation or to harm you. When you're going no contact, you're not talking negatively about anyone. You're not doing a smear campaign. You're not falsifying the truth. You're not broadcasting it to whoever you possibly can. You're just doing it to protect yourself. You're doing something essential for your healing to protect yourself from further harm and abuse. So I highlighted and bookmarked a bunch of pages, but let me go to the first one here
If you're just listening and not watching
I know,
the podcast,
seriously.
Angie's leafing through a book in which she has roughly 75 bookmarks.
It's okay, I know where they are, kind of. So, first time I read through this, I had a highlighter. Tried not to highlight every single thing because I connected with it so much. But I highlighted on page 22. She says, I cut ties because the continued psychological damage inflicted by my family was so unlivable I had no other healthy choice. I explained that the decision had grown, morphed, and developed over 45 years of trying every failed way to stay connected to my family. The lies, betrayals, and cruelties thrown at me throughout my life were so vile and calculated, I knew my only reasonable choice was to protect myself. I did not want to sever ties. I had to. It was a decision not of confidence, but of survival. And that's exactly how I felt. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It's something I wish I would have done sooner, now that I've done it. But I I understand now that I can't even name how many times I tried to have conversations, tried to connect, tried to understand that were flipped and turned against me or scoffed off, and I was belittled for even wanting to have the conversation. So I deeply connected to that. Then she goes on in a few more pages and says, the initial ties to the relationship between yourself and your family are cut by your toxic family when they discard you for not acquiescing to their abuses or manipulations. The ties stay cut only when you stand up for yourself and make the self-respecting decision that it is no longer your responsibility to repair the damage not caused by you, and you then choose to stay silent. Your silence does offer your family members the choice and room to repair the relationship, but psychologically abusive people prefer revenge over repair. And that's exactly what it was. It was, they had already discarded me. They were giving me the silent treatment. I had found out that they were gossiping and saying I did the background check with the intention of using it against someone, or I was meddling in some way in my sister's relationship by just trying to continue to have contact with her, and all these other rumors that were going on behind my back. And because I didn't just give in and, wait out their silent treatment until they did a phony reach out with birthday gifts or a holiday. What do the kids want for Christmas was like the first contact I had. And it was like, what? Why gifts? Really? And that's been the pattern. We've just had to go, oh, well, it's the holidays. And it wasn't even presented like that's how they are. It was just like this ingrained, well, it is the holidays. I don't want, my kids to be involved. I don't want my kids to be harmed. So I guess, allowing this, we'll move past it. That's always been the pattern. And I think that's what they expected. So she then goes on to talk about needing to grieve that this is happening, that not only were you discarded, but now in order for you to protect yourself from further harm or abuse, you actually need to make that hard decision of going no contact and not allowing that abuse anymore. And she says, unfortunately, many will not understand and few will have empathy for you and your grief. Some will naively blame you for causing your own pain since it was your decision to cut ties when, according to them, you didn't have to. This projection from others is based on ignorance. They have no idea what you have lived through for your entire life. And I remember talking with Val about this at one point, and her kind of explaining her side of like the things that she had heard about me and that, the gossiping that my older brother was doing and all of that, and just being like, no one needs to hear this. This is awful. And then having me explain things that she didn't know that I had received. And she said to me, if I would have received the treatment that you did, if I would have gone through what you went through, I would have just been in a ditch somewhere. Like, how did you do this? And that's what made it easier for me to just be like, I'm done. I'm not. And that also shows how one-sided our relationships were anyway. The only reason we had any connection was because I kept acquiescing and trying to mend and trying to understand and try to have difficult conversations to have a connection. And then the second I said, no, this is not my responsibility. I did not do this. I'm not going to just cave because you're asking about Christmas presents. No. This is not okay, and it stops here. There's nothing. There's been nothing.
Right. You have done 100% of the work. We've talked about that on several episodes where you were the one pushing for deeper conversations, deeper understanding. You had to get your dad to come to our apartment and talk to him for 5 straight hours. He wasn't going to do that. Your mom wasn't going to do that. You had to do all of the work in research and come to them, like we talked about in the last episode, where you had to have this plan because you knew if you didn't put in all of the work, it wasn't going to happen. So it was a one-sided relationship.
And I felt like it was my job to do that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot to carry. So she goes on to talk about, in a few chapters, this is on page 95 if you get the book. And if you've gone through anything like this, you need to get this book. It's amazing. But she talks about searching for your true self. So, bad, in quotes, was the assumed role I was given in my family. I fit in as the perceived problem. Without a scapegoat, which is the person to blame and pick on, the toxicity in the family system cannot dominate. There must be at least one person to provoke and manipulate into carrying the outward expression of the trauma, so only they are seen as the cause of the family's problems. This setup relieves all other family members of the family. This setup relieves all other members of the family of responsibility for the consequences of their abuse. I did not choose this role, and anyone else who's in this position didn't choose it either. So the scapegoat, who is the real victim, is deemed the perpetrator by the family, while the real perpetrators are seen as the victims. That's how they set this up. And she talks about, and it's so crazy. Like when she says some of these things, it is so exactly how I was feeling. I felt like she was like in my brain. She was like sitting on my shoulder in my room as a kid. It's great. She said, they have expressed all of these varying emotional states and moods and been labeled the problem, the scapegoat. Toxic family systems demonstrate an outright refusal to examine or acknowledge the pain they cause. You know from experience that your family members choose to ignore the pain behind your rage or your neediness, the truth, frustration, and your sadness. They turn the tables on you, dismissing the validity of the truths you screamed. Instead of taking care of you or showing interest and concern for what you felt, they shunned you. And choosing to go no contact and no longer allowing them to harm me in that way leads me to this next point that she talks about. The difference after establishing no contact is that you have put the relationship with your abusers into an active state of emotional silence. So there's no more arguments, no more emotional games, manipulation, gossip, being ostracized, or defending yourself. No more verbal or physical engagement. This emotional silence largely mutes your predatory family's opportunity to continue to create that chaos in your life. And we talked about that before, of how in my sister Val and my younger brother, us coming together and seeing the reality of the situation, I was like, I'm done. I'm so done. And they were like, don't say anything. Let us handle this. I got this. Let me do this. You don't say anything, because they can't turn it against you. They can't flip your words. They can't, create this different narrative based on something you said when you don't say anything.
But they still did.
They still did.
Because the feedback you always received was from your younger brother, I said this, it was his own thought. I said this to the family, and the reply was, well, Angie, XYZ.
Yeah. And it squashed. And I think it lost steam, and even as we were calling out things further, kind of as a combined unit between Val and me and my younger brother, it was more about like, all right, there's three of us who see this and we're trying to help you all. And we're all seeing it from different viewpoints as well, but we're seeing the same thing. We're trying to explain it to you and you're still not seeing it. So what's going on? And I think because I pulled back for, it was close to 2 years of not responding or saying anything, their ability to try to twist something and turn something on me didn't exist. So it was very easy. It was even easier for Val and my younger brother to see the toxicity, to see where they're going to pull from something. They're going to pull this narrative, this, I think, as my younger brother put it, this like super played out idea that doesn't exist. They're still trying to bring that back. But then if you bring up something from the past, why can't you get over it type of attitude? But they don't have anything more recent. Well, now that I started the podcast, of course, that could be it. But they don't have anything that they could flip and twist and say to turn it around on me because I was silent. So it wasn't that my silence was power for them. It was removing this tactic that they used to harm. Not only harm me, but harm everyone else around us to believe their narrative. And I wanted to do one last page on the scapegoat that she just really nailed it. So she says, the moment you choose to sever ties with families, if you weren't already the scapegoat beforehand, though it's likely you were, your decision to cut ties will effectively place you in that role. To be the scapegoat means your family will repeatedly cast you out in a negative light, portraying who you are to others in a one-dimensional view that denies the fullness of your humanity. The family scapegoat is the person the family labels as mentally ill, emotionally unstable, or a liar. So naturally, to be spoken about in this way is traumatizing. She says, these lies spread by your family are nothing but defamatory propaganda, but many people, including your healthier family members, will not question or investigate the stories told, nor will they take a stand for you for fear of getting on your family's bad side. You know there is no truth to your toxic family's disparaging lies, but you are rendered defenseless against them because any reaction you show will be viewed by others as evidence of your mental health problems. So when you actually weren't mentally ill or the horrible person they had you and many others believing you were, it's this fact of truth that you've known. And she says, did you struggle as a child? Yes, because you tried to fight for yourself and stand up for what you believed in. Were you being emotionally abused and manipulated? Yes. Did you have a strong reaction to the abuses and manipulations doled out by your family? Probably. Your family likely handled this by turning your fighting for yourself into a grotesque narrative about your poor mental health and instability. And then she goes on to say, when you tell the truth, it will be powerful enough to act as a destabilizing force in a family system that depends on lies, false narratives, control, guilt, denial, and projection to maintain its equilibrium. Is that so well put? She just nails it. So we want to leave you with this today. She talks about empowering yourself, and she does a lot of the unlearning of this messaging. And she talks about the truth in telling your story. So empowering yourself with the truth that you've always known is what she's referring to here. So she says, never sacrifice your truth to a system of lies. She says, in sharing my story, I learned that the truth of your family situation will not alter, no matter how your family members try and subtract from it, excuse it, gaslight it, or lie to cover it up. None of these antics make the truth any less than or any different from what the truth already is. You have no responsibility to negotiate a truth that is not negotiable. And I mean, we've talked about that, as, you know, me and you separately a bunch of times, about just because you're denying that that situation happened or you're pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it any less true. It's just the way you're manipulating yourself to deny reality. And how is that helping you? How is that hurting you? It all depends on what level of growth or healing that you're in. But I think leaving you with this, because the whole reason I'm doing this podcast is the education, the awareness, sharing that knowledge is power, because blindly accepting this abuse and feeling it, that it's wrong internally, is so damaging. And there's so much more on the other side. Like, going no contact is so hard, and there's so much grief, and there's so many things that I wouldn't want. I wouldn't choose for me to not have contact with half of my immediate family. I wouldn't choose that. But I had to choose that to protect myself. So she talks about, when it comes to psychologically abusive family systems, knowledge is power. Personal education is a giant, continual, and critical part of your growth. At their core, psychologically dysfunctional people suffer from self-hatred and deep internalized shame. And I think understanding that you've been trying to understand, you've been trying to share your experience, and it's been shut down, and you're made to feel less than, even if it's temporary. I still carry a lot of grief and abandonment wounds that I am constantly, after 40 years of experiencing this, and really bringing it to light and having books like this validate my experience and understand literally, like, some of the things she says in here are exactly how I feel and how I felt as a kid. So finding and connecting to the knowledge will give you your power back. Like, some of this stuff that I've been able to do since going no contact and not having those negative messages in my life, is I've been able to work on my own healing. I've been able to have harder conversations. I have built stronger connections with the healthy people in my life. I've given myself space and really actually tuned into my emotions instead of trying to stuff them down like they don't exist. And I think if someone is toxic outside of the family, no one would expect you to be in contact with someone who's harming you. And I hope in sharing some of these examples of the way I was treated, it's not looked at in a light of just a list of items. Like, really listen to this with understanding the emotional, like, put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving this treatment and think about, what would you do? And what knowledge can you take from this episode to move forward your own healing? What knowledge can give you power to be true to yourself? And let us know what you think. I'd love to hear your feedback. Until next time.